So I also would like to start with thanking Sharon for providing this space where we can talk and think together about renegotiation of Iranian identity. My presentation is going to be about Jiyan Azadî and the idea of difference, and I will talk about it in the context of Diasporic Iranian feminist approach to diversity. This research is inspired by my own involvement with this movement as an Iranian feminist based in Germany. I'll start with a quote from Audre Lorde where she says, "It's not our difference that divides us, it's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." My research questions are basically the idea is trying to shed light on moments of negotiation, performance, and imagination of Iranianness in the diaspora, and I will ask how diasporic Iranian feminism in forms of collectives and individuals in Germany understand and articulate diversity within their activist frameworks, and I will also talk about one scholarly context. How have they reconfigured their discourse and mobilization strategies around gender equality, LGBTQIA+ rights, and the national rights of quote-unquote minorities in light of the radical intersectionality of Jiyan Azadî revolutionary movement. So, given that the revolutionary movement of women life freedom originated from Kurdistan and later radiated across Iran, and considering that this slogan is deeply rooted in the Kurdish freedom movement, the Kurdish question is arguably a key element of women life freedom uprising. Accordingly, my research analyzes the divergent ways in which Iranian feminists view Kurdish national political demands as a critical lens through which their commitment to diversity and solidarity can be assessed. Iranian diasporic feminist activism in Germany demonstrates great heterogeneity. Interestingly, it's somehow has started with the idea with the compulsory hijab, when in 1980 the Islamic regime required women to don hijab in their passport pictures. The impetus of creating an autonomous Iranian women's movement in Germany arose, and many organizations and collectives were formed. Some of them are still active until today. However, it was on October 22nd, 2022 that Berlin witnessed the largest ever rally of Iranians advocating for a women's life freedom revolutionary movement in Iran. This demo was co-organized by two groups. On the one hand, the associations of families of Flight PS752 victims shaped by the justice-seeking families who lost loved ones when Ukrainian international airline flight was shot down by two missiles of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in January 2020. And on the other hand, the Women Life Freedom Collective in Berlin. On their Instagram page, they define themselves as a political organization, autonomous feminist grassroots, supporting Jina's revolution. So due to this collective's pivotal role in co-organizing the demo in Berlin, I have limited my research at this stage to this collective and asked how they have approached difference, both internally in the collective and in negotiation with the Flight PS752 Association. I aim to problematize our understanding of how Iranianness is constituted, contested, negotiated, performed, and imagined through a lens of feminist solidarity. And I will ask three questions. What is in a name? What is in a star, Sternchen? And what is in a flag? So this is the feminist collective I'm talking about. Woman, Sternchen, Life Freedom Collective in Berlin. This gives you an idea of how their Instagram page looks like. So in answering what is in a name, what do the linguistic choice that Women Life Freedom Berlin have made on their Instagram page as the embodiment of the spirit of a collective identity tell us about their stand on diversity? While some users may not be specifically aware of the implications of their choice between Mahsa and Jina, Adopting each would mean a different political stand towards Kurdish political demands. There are no formal legal prohibitions on non-Persian or non-religious names. However, the Iranian state has denied many Kurdish and other non-Persian speaking families the ability to register names for their children in their own language. Therefore, many have a name in their that they use at home and one that they use in the administrative context. This denial of cultural identity in Rojhelat constitutes an act of political, cultural destruction, assimilation, and subordination. In light of Iran's unitary nation state building project and its semi-colonial past, Kamran Matin introduced the concept of inter-subaltern colonialism that Sarah also talked about to describe the post-colonial state's ideological reconstruction of stateless people within their territory as ethnic minorities, which are ontologically securitized and hence subjected to economic exploitation, resource extraction, and environmental degradation. So the Women Life Freedom Collective's linguistic and symbolic assertion of Jiyan is a political intervention aspiring to expose and resist this mode of colonization. This praxis contests a monolithic narrative of Iranianness that obscures or diminishes the diversity of cultures, languages, and histories across the Iranian plateau to serve as a basis for justification of Persian hegemony over Iran's past, present, and future. According to Sanat Azimipur, and she identifies as a feminist abolitionist activist and a founding member of Women Life Freedom Collective, it was their previous cooperation with Kurdish associations such as Jiyan, the Kurdish Women's Office for Peace based in Berlin, over feminist causes as well as other feminist and leftist organizations that has raised sensitivity over Kurdistan for some Iranian activists. In this transnational leftist feminist anti-racist discourse in Germany, the issue of solidarity with Kurdistan as an anti-colonial struggle and an emancipatory movement was already established. She says, and I quote, "For the first demos we organized, we invited the speakers from Migrantify. And Migrantify is a... a self-organized network founded in response to the racist attacks in Hanau, and Netzwerk gegen Feministit in Berlin. It's a network Berlin-wide of feminist groups and collectives that they fight against femicide. We invited them and we wanted them to take a stand in support of women life freedom in Iran. And they would bring this international perspective as leftist activists in Germany, in which the Kurdish question was already present. Furthermore, through adopting the slogan Jiyan Azadî in Kurdish in their discourse, these feminists acknowledge it as being rooted in Kurdish feminist movement. And here I talk about a scholarly article, but in this activism context also. Conceptualizing the women life freedom movement in Iran as a feminist strike, Shirin Asa and other founding members of Women Life Freedom Collective says, politicization following the state murder of Jiyan was made possible by a dialectical process intertwining the long-standing political subjectivity of women in Rojhelat and the intersectional feminist practices within Iran. Rojhelat, as many of us may know by now, means east in Kurdish, and thus Kurdistan, Iran, as Sarah already talked about it. However, in her work, Shirin uses it with no reference to Iran. In explaining her decision to use Rojhelat in her text, she said, as a Farsi-speaking researcher, I had never been exposed to any of the data on Kurdistan that you would find in my paper now. That material was in my blind spot. It was through my activism that I got to know Kejar, East Kurdish Women's Society, and other Kurdish communities and activists, and via the conversation I had with them, I could access the sources about Kurdistan. The methodology of intersectionality would emphasize that you should look for invisibilities. So in the process of looking for Kurdistan as an invisibility for me, I got acquainted with the works of Fatemeh Karimi, Golrukh Qobadi, and Somai Rustampour, among others. In my commitment to the methodology of intersectionality, I use references written by Kurds when talking about Kurdistan. So thinking with their language, Their perspective and their story could not lead to anything other than me calling it Rojhalat, because for them it was not Iran but Rojhalat. So analyzing the decision-making dynamics within the collective falls behind the micro interactions that happen is beyond the scope of this research. However, it's crucial to emphasize the moments of, as Sanas puts it, navigating through difference from inside and out, as the collective has experienced it in their cooperation with the associations of families of flight PS752 victims. The association had its main focus on seeking justice, dadkhahi, thereby proposing speakers from mothers of Khavaran, mothers of Aban, and one speaker from their own association, in order to avoid controversy and radical politics. They lacked, however, a focus on gender and ethnic national diversity, leading to extensive discussions in which Women Life Freedom Collective insisted on including a Kurdish and a Baluchi speaker, as well as queer and trans ones that we will see finally appear on the stage in Berlin. So my next question is, what is in a star? And here I quote Ozi Ozar, a queer activist in this collective, and they say, Jin in Kurdish doesn't have the colonial binary understanding of a female or cis female, it should be cisgender, but this is what Ozi said, body. But then again, even in the Kurdish community, there is homophobia and queer antagonisms to be addressed. So, how do we address it without changing the slogan? Reflecting on the internal discussions the Women Life Freedom Collective has, Ozi, a queer activist of the collective, voices their internal doubts, challenges, and contestations about the inclusivity of the term woman. The above-mentioned quote demonstrates their commitment to keeping the slogan in its Kurdish form, while remaining critical of homo, trans, and queer phobia. Ozi continues, and I think we are one of the only collectives that still uses the asterisk, the star after women, which puts us in a rather fragile position, because we are the leftist liberal group that is intersectional, and we want we want the door to be open for queer community to come and talk to us. We have created a safer space to have this sort of communication. Gendersternchen, often translated as gender star, is a distinctly German linguistic tool used to promote a gender-inclusive language. Yet it remains a deeply contested issue within feminist and activist discourses, particularly around questions of inclusion and solidarity. There were draining discussions over the star. One approach that agreed with adding the star intended for it to signify that that when talking about women in the collective, it is not just talking about female bodies, so biology, but rather all people who are affected by patriarchy. The opponents were arguing that the star would mean that the trans women are not women, but just a star over the word woman. Sanas mentions that as an activist who follows this discourse in the German feminist discourse, I can testify that this is a never-ending discussions with no such an answer. However, as Mina Mahmoudian, a feminist activist in Germany, who was participating in this discussion at the time, argues in favor of her agreement with keeping this tension. She says, despite the impossibility of a definite answer, I believe it is a form of representation of sexual gender minorities that was required, and a new contract needed to be negotiated and constituted around the issue. It was an attempt to establish the gender diversity in language, like when we write black or schwarz with capital letters to refer to black people and their struggles, and when we write about colors, we write them, or describing things, we write them with small letters. This is a great achievement that it has, that it was established in the language at that moment. The collective was targeted by online posts that accused them of transphobia with the same aforementioned arguments that it is not 5 minutes.
You got this.
So I jump over the Sternchen. I hope you got the idea. Although the issue of representation in language remained contested, the desire was there for them to be as inclusive as possible. Then I jump to the flag, as controversial as they are. Like any other flag, flags selected by the Iranian diaspora operate on the dual level of symbolizing heritage and identity, as well as perpetuating division and exclusion. I would like to cite Shirin Khayambashi, who has worked on the issue of flags in the diaspora. The use of the flag is an attempt to mend the broken links with the ancestral homeland, but the definition of homeland varies under different flags. Historical and environmental factors construct and influence dynamics within the Iranian diaspora, which affect the image of the diaspora in its members. This image allows the diasporic community to represent themselves however they desire to be seen by the general public. Can I sacrifice some dessert and get like?
That was a good one.
You get 2 minutes.
No.
Ask nicely, yeah.
Okay. You know all the fight about the flags, and I will just jump to. Okay. So the arguments Sanas gives in support of their decision for no flag, as you can see, other than LGBTQIA+ and Kurdistan flag, is that they had this stand of being inclusive and recognizing the right of national minorities. So they didn't want any nation-state flag, but it was okay for them to have Kurdish and Palestinian and Pride flags. But in negotiations for the demo in October with the PS 572 Justice Association, they came to the conclusion that people can bring. They didn't come to the conclusion, but there was this discussion, and the outcome was that everybody could bring their flag as long as they are considerate of the issue of unity. I think we talked about unity and already what kind of unity we are talking about. Okay, then I jumped to the conclusion where through their activism they discovered a blind spot of their intersectionality, as sensitive as they were to the issues of gender and racism, national rights. They were totally oblivious about the issue of generation, and this is something that through organizing for the demo, they noticed that there are many people who cannot go all the demonstration route with them, and there is also, back to what I said about hijab, and it was the motivating issue for organization in Germany in 1980. The issue of generation was absolutely prominent for them, as they have noticed that it is as if there are two lines of organization in the same city within the same diaspora. So I just read one last paragraph. So, considering gender diversity and Kurdish national demands as critical lenses to assess Women Life Freedom Collective's commitment to diversity and solidarity, I have tried to shed light on the few moments of negotiating difference both within the collective and in their cooperation with other groups in the opposition. The Jiyan Azadî movement has encouraged these Iranian activists embedded in the anti-racist feminist discourses in Germany to further embrace diverse identities and experiences, and thus contributing to the constitution, contestation, negotiation, performance, imagination and reimagination of an Iranianness which is shaped and reshaped with each historical moment. Thank you.